when Walt's doing all this stuff, do you think the American people like are picking up on this at all? Like, were there theories even back then that you know of being like, this guy's interjecting, bad symbolism into our society?
If anything, man, and this is kind of weird how it dovetails into the adrenochrome type research,
Yeah.
but as I'm looking at these old magazine articles and newspaper articles from the early 1900s, one of the things that really made an impression on me is how well versed people then were with these sort of like ancient pagan cults and rituals. Like you would open up the newspaper and read an article about ancient Babylon and Moloch worship and like Asherah research. And this was kind of a common water cooler talk. You might be talking about occult topics and Manly Palmer Hall style stuff. Like this was kind of in vogue at the time. So now, if you look in 1990s or the early 2000s, and someone's like, "Oh man, this Disney movie is just filled with old pagan and Babylonian rituals." If you made that same claim in the 1930s and 40s, it's like, yeah, no duh, man. That's the reason why we like it, is because it's talking about all of these topics that are already in vogue with us now. So I feel that if anything, people were more accepting and they were more conscious of the occult teachings that were in these early Disney movies than they are now. It feels like they're hidden. And I think that's just because we have less, I guess, familiarity with some of these claims. It usually comes up in like fringe and conspiracy and occult circles versus water cooler talk.
Right. That is very interesting. Where do you think, well, I guess while you're there as an animator, because a theory is you hear people say like they're sneaking in things. Did you ever see anything like that where someone's sneaking in something?
No, the most salacious thing that I ever saw was that an older gentleman that worked at the park, had a heart attack on the Tower of Terror. Not the ride, like he was the guy that would like tell you which of the elevators to get into.
Yeah.
He had like an episode, and because Disney basically owns their own municipality, they've got their own police force, fire department, their own EMS. They basically send the Disney EMS to scoop this guy up, drive him just off of Disney property, and then declare that he died from a heart attack. And the way they do this is they can say no one has died on this property, no one's ever died on this ride. Well, technically, if you don't declare them dead until you drive them off property.
Wow.
So, and I usually equate that, like, if you ever seen The Wire and the detectives are constantly fighting when like a body washes up on a shore somewhere, and then all of a sudden they're arguing over, well, that's in your jurisdiction, and then another cop would be like, well, they got killed in your jurisdiction. There's sort of that balance of it. That's the craziest thing that I personally was privy to. The other wild one is there was a death that was so horrific on the Who Framed Roger Rabbit ride in Disneyland.
What a sentence, by the
West
way.
Coast.
Yeah.
That they couldn't cover up. It was horrific.
Like, can you give us like a
like a child got caught under the actual little cars that drove around, and it just drug him around like an acrylic pencil. By the time they were able to stop it, there was nothing left, just like a nub and a big line of where it left all of his viscera.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry I asked that question.
People say, something about Smurfs.
Smurfs? What's up with Smurfs? People are commenting about Smurfs. Do you know anything about that?
I've heard like the DMT entity aspect of it.
Like the machine elves?
Like Nephilim claims.
Right, right.
No, I'm not. I don't know. I'm not familiar with any specifics.
You're not well versed in the Smurf
Never
lore.
mind
I heard, and Gargamel might have been the good guy. I don't know. That's a common take now.
Right. It's written by the Gnostics.
Gargamel did nothing wrong.
Is it Disney movies that have a lot of parents that are dead?
Yeah. So I have a podcast called Occult Disney where we've been rewatching every single theatrical Disney animated movie since Snow White up to, I think we just got to like 2009 or so. We just did Up.
Oh, cool.
And I didn't coin this myself, and I can't remember where I heard it, but we've been developing this far more than I think anyone has, this concept called the Disney proxy. And the Disney proxy basically states that let's say it's 1985 or something. You sit your kid in front of the TV, and you just need them to be occupied for a while. So you pop in Snow White, you pop in Mary Poppins, whatever it is, so that you can go into the other room and do your adult stuff.
Yep.
And for this period of time, let's say your kid's like 4 or 5 years old, you set them in front of this television, they become entranced by this world. Like the outside world ceases to exist. and now these characters that they're introduced to become just as real as the neighbor next door would be.
Yeah.
And what usually happens in the first few minutes of a Disney movie, and this becomes more formulaic as time goes on. You can almost you know, measure the space on your watch based on how long it takes for them to introduce the dynamic. And the Disney proxy is that they will immediately have a child removed from their authority figures. Either they get kidnapped, the parents die, they get lost, they fall into a river and they get swept away, kind of like Ratatouille style. Every single Disney movie after Bambi seems to follow this formula. And the very next thing that happens after the child is removed from the authority figure, and again, if you're a 5-year-old watching this, then the protagonist getting separated, or the protagonist getting kidnapped, they're identifying with that protagonist. So now it feels like you've been kidnapped, and you look around and mom's not here because she's in the other room doing the adult stuff, which is the whole reason that you got sat in front of the TV. The very next thing that'll happen is that the lead sidekick, the thing that's going to be on Happy Meal toys and lunchboxes and t-shirts, is the thing that comes and saves you. Now Thumper comes and he's your savior, or whoever they end up being, the very first thing you see. And I believe that there's an insidious formulaic aspect of this, is that they know, let's kill the parents, let's have the kid get kidnapped. Okay, now the next thing that they see on screen, they're now going to associate that. They're going to be like an NLP anchor to, this is the new savior. So now when they're at Kmart with their parents, or they're at McDonald's and they see, it's like, there's Thumper, Dad. Thumper saved me when you abandoned me. Remember that time that Mom died in the fort? The hunter shot Mom, and then we ran into Thumper. Well, now I love Thumper forever, and that burrows itself deep into the brain. And I think that once Disney saw that actually working, like we're moving more product because of this character being the first savior, they start codifying this into the movies. They start almost writing movies around this Disney proxy.
So what you're saying is, not only did Disney create World War II, but also started destroying the nuclear family.
More or less, yeah. Although I don't know if you saw it that way, but Disney himself had some really weird family issues. And some of this, like this princess programming stuff about, you're a princess captured in a castle by your evil step parents, and they're preventing you from reuniting with your true royal noble blood, and that everything would be perfect if just you could escape this castle you've been imprisoned in. This is another wild Disney backstory. Have you ever heard that he was appointed a special agent in charge of the FBI by J. Edgar Hoover personally?
Nope, I didn't
So
know that.
this was during sort of an animator's version of the McCarthyism, where they were looking for anti-American messaging, and Walt Disney was clearly a leader in his field in this animation, subgenre. So the FBI, they realize that he's got some major daddy issues, which explains his involvement with the Demolay and a whole lot of other sort of aspects of his growing up. But they premise this where they write him a letter, and they realized that Disney considered that he was actually from a noble Spanish family, that somewhere in Spain he was related to like kings and queens, and that somehow he was either orphaned or got adopted or got kidnapped by his family that he grew up with, and that he was always trying to find his connections back to his like original roots. FBI gets wind of this, and they write him a letter, and they basically they dangle the carrot in front of him. They say, Disney, we have found some basis for your suspicions. We do think that we found this royal Spanish bloodline that you were part of, and that your actual lineage comes from real kings and queens, right? So now Disney, in his own mind, he is a Disney princess. He has been captured from his royal family, forced to live under these like the mean rules of, the stepdad. And they play this with him, and they say, hey, in exchange, we'll give you more of this information, but we want to appoint you special agent in charge, FBI, of this like rooting out anti-American sentiment in the animation industry. So it goes so deep to his core of this princess programming that I don't know if I feel like Disney's trying to program the world, or if he's just trying to work through something on his own.
Or if they're kind of puppeteering him to do these things without him even realizing. Because the way you just described that situation, the FBI swooped in on Disney like the way Thumper does, you know, like it's like that. It's like that proxy that moves in and kind of saves the kid. And Disney seemed like an adult kid, right? In many ways. I mean, I've watched documentaries about him creating Mary Poppins and just what went into that, and he was like obsessed. But he was like a child, right? Who just had a lot of money and was able to create, manifest these things in his head. That's interesting. I had no idea about that at all.
Yeah, that's from his unofficial biography. I think it's called Hollywood's Dark Prince. Although they recount the actual letter from the FBI in that. So the book itself says a number of things that the Disney family has not been happy with over the years, and they've basically tried to debunk a large portion of that. But it's really hard to debunk an actual letter from the FBI stating, "Hey, we've looked into this. You've got family in Spain. They're royals. Now be a special agent in charge for us."
That's wild. So people can look up the letter and stuff. It's online.
Correct. Yeah. If you just look up the FBI J. Edgar Hoover Disney special agent in charge letter.
That is crazy. So now, you said you did Up. What did you see in that movie that was occultish, other than like, I guess the kid leaving his family and finding that guy?
Well, Up is an interesting movie because it does have the Disney proxy in a way, because he inadvertently kidnaps this young Asian kid that he tells him to go and look for, like this mythical snake bird creature called a snipe.
That's right.
And then he detaches his house, and as he's floating up in the air, he realizes this kid, I think his name is Russell, he realizes Russell's now along for the ride. Russell's been separated from his family, but the story tweaks it a little bit because you find out Russell is part of a broken home, that his dad no longer has any time for him. And he mentions it a couple of times about last time I called my dad, his girlfriend answered the phone and yelled at me and said that I've been taking too much time away from my dad. So they sort of flip the proxy in that, yes, he got kidnapped, but it was an accidental kidnapping, and his regular home life was not that great. So you don't really see it as the exact same premise here, but the formula is still there. They just kind of tweak it a little bit. And the other thing that stands out in Up is that it's one of the very few Disney movies in which the good guy protagonist violently assaults another human being and draws blood. There's a scene when the old guy goes out and he hits someone on the head that's there to, like, ask him if he's going to sell his house or whatever. And when he hits him on the head, the guy starts bleeding and he runs back inside, and the cops come. And that's actually the catalyst for him even launching his house into the airs. He's trying to escape the police that are going to basically come to arrest him for violating probation, and they're going to put him in an old man's home.
What is the darkest, most occult Disney movie that you've reviewed so far?
I would argue Fantasia, but for a very long reason. And maybe the shorter one would be Little Nemo, because in Little Nemo, the Disney proxy is like 1,000 children die at the very beginning. We see the entire colony of eggs, right? And all of them get wiped out except for this one egg.
Whoa.
So if you're just going like in sheer numbers, the ratio of dead children
Fish
to
genocide.
Disney proxy, that one wins. I would say Fantasia is the most occult, though, because they are actually reimagining real occult rituals that would happen in Wolfsburger's Night, and like kind of the same premise of Cremation of Care and Bohemian Grove, except this one has far more historical relevance to it, and even established this archetype of Chernobog, which translates to the Black God. And that's this major scene when you see him kind of rise up from the mountainside. And if you pause and you look at the silhouette of Chernobog, the Black God, you'll notice that exact same silhouette is repeated over and over in Disney movies. The most obvious would be Maleficent. If you look at the actual silhouette of Maleficent, it's almost identical to the silhouette of Chernobog. And I think that this is kind of the premise of all of Fantasia. Fantasia the movie is a magical spell in which the Disney Corporation casts on the entire world in order to create something that is just fiction or magic and makes it real. And I would argue that the movie Fantasia very much makes a Disney reality in which the Disney world is going to live longer than either of us, right? Either of my kids. The Disney universe is going to live far longer than anyone that's on the planet right now. And in that case, the magical incantation of Fantasia very much worked. And even magical rituals, they tend to gain more power the more you do them over and over. So every time someone puts on Fantasia or any Disney movie, it's really just repeating a magical incantation and making it stronger.
Yeah, and anytime you encounter the branding in the real world, it kind of triggers, for lack of a better word, their magic spell, because it's like unlocking the memories inside of you. Fantasia always weirded me out as a kid. I didn't watch that one a lot. I was like, this is just weird. But it, you know, in retrospect, it's in retro. I don't even understand the whole. Is there like a narrative to that movie?
No, the premise was that it was groundbreaking at the time, because what Disney had in the back of his head was that they were going to take this on the road, and that this is before even like talkies were becoming a big thing. So the premise was that you would have a traveling show, and every time you set up, you'd put the screen, but you'd also have a live orchestra behind it. So if you went to the exact same Disney show in two different cities, you might get a completely different experience, almost like you would if you went to a concert, you know, because the band had a slightly different energy. Maybe they swap out this player or this instrument with another one. So it was supposed to almost be a animated vaudeville sort of effect to it. But during the course of making it, Hollywood completely changed into this, from like the silent movies into the talkies.
Wow.
And the whole entire premise of traveling around the country became less scalable, and it wasn't really as attainable as they were expecting it to originally. So Fantasia was a way to sort of crystallize what they envisioned the traveling show would look like as a standard theatrical release. And the reason why it doesn't make sense to a lot of people is because they really were just a whole bunch of little vignettes kind of squished together, and they sort of turned it into a narrative. But originally, those individual stories inside of Fantasia didn't necessarily have like a chronological order. They weren't meant to be seen in any specific way or order. It was just like a collection, the same way that you'd have like Merry Melodies or any other of like the cartoons being put together.
Do you recommend parents showing their kids Disney films?
I think with a caveat that in my opinion, the most insidious thing Disney does is that they own real estate in your kid's brain, and they kind of will forever. But it also becomes this weird dynamic where some parents will be like, well, of course we have to give our 3-year-old an iPad because every other 3-year-old has an iPad, and we don't want them to like stick out as these weird, you know, be ostracized because I guess they're like anti-tech, or they're just not keeping up with the Joneses, right? And I think that Disney has now reached such a cult conglomerate status that not allowing your kids to watch Disney movies could be perceived as now you're not allowing them to go through the same social interactions with other people they're going to run into in school and later in life. Like, you're holding your kids back developmentally from not allowing them to watch Disney. I think that's so insidious because it almost ends up being true, but you also have to realize that it never leaves their brain. For example, all these grim fairy tales, all these public domain stories, if you were to say Snow White, if you were to say Alice in Wonderland or Cinderella, most of the time what you conjure up in your head is an intellectual property owned by the Disney Corporation. It's not the public domain version of Alice. It's like the Disney version of Alice. And the more they do that, the more that they literally own thoughts in your head that they can monetize and you can't. So that's probably the part that I'd say be weary of. But I'm not as scared of Dick Castles or the word sex in the sky written out in like dust and feathers.
Yeah. It's weird that a corporation has monopolized our imagination while also monopolizing, in a way, imagination. Like what you were saying with it's going to outlive, you know, us. This thing's going to last forever. It's like this is beast forever. But I'm with you on that. And like you just with let them watch with a caveat. But
someone in our chat wants to know, they said, at Disneyland, there are secret rooms throughout the park, some for special guests, but some are strange, like the child's room with the see-through windows inside Pirates of the Caribbean. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, there's one, I think it's Club 33, and this is more of a thing on the West Coast in Disneyland. And originally, it was the little secret doors and rooms where you could go and get drunk. Like, they didn't serve alcohol anywhere on the property.
On adrenochrome.
Unless you knew, and adrenochrome. That if you knew about where these secret doors were at, and I think that there's a hefty price tag. It's like 5 figures to be a member per year.
Wow.
And it's just a way that you can drink on property. That's the surface explanation. I've heard all the rumors that you go into one of those rooms and yeah, you just snap a kid's neck off and
Oh,
you
God.
drink the adrenochrome, you go back out into the park. I don't think
I
that
believe
those
it.
necessarily are
I
true.
I
but-
believe it. He said it. He worked there. He's the expert. He's been there 10 years. You heard it here first, everyone. Paranoid American has just confirmed it. Walt Disney's ghost just came into this room and is haunting me.